for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. And you can probably hear that I have still got a cold and I still sound not my normal self. I've got a bit of a husky voice going on. So hopefully I'll still be able to get through the whole video without coughing or anything. I'm going to do a Friday read today because I haven't done one for about 3 weeks or so. I've got a few things to wrap up. I can tell you what I'm reading at the moment, and then if I've got time, I'll tell you which books I've hauled, which is an embarrassingly high number considering I'm trying so hard to get my TBR down. But I guess what I would say is I'm replacing books that I wasn't so fussed about with books that I am really keen to read. So I guess we're making progress in the right direction, even if we're not so much making progress with numbers. So let me start by telling you what I read so far since I did my last Friday reads. So I finished my book club book, which was called Pieces of Hair by Karin, which was a crime thriller book, which has been made into a Netflix series. But for the people who have watched the Netflix series, they said it's really not as good as the book and not to bother, so I'm not going to. But it's a really good book. It's not the kind of thing I'd normally read at all, and I was very drawn in. I listened to it and I think that it was quite a propulsive book. It's about a girl called Andy who lives with her mum in her mum's attic in like a conversion, and she has a bit of a dead-end job. She went to New York and tried living there and didn't really like it and came home. And when she's in a cafe with her mum, there's a shooting in the cafe, and her mum basically manages to keep really calm and to stop the shooter hurting anyone else, but in doing so the shooter dies, and the mum uses techniques which experts say would only be done by people who had professional training, and as far as Andy knows, her mum's never done anything like that before. And then all sorts of sort of dangerous events start coming as a consequence of this. And Andy's mum basically says to her, you need to go to this secret storage area. You need to get a car that's parked there. There's money in there. You need to find your way to this address. And Andy's like, what on earth are you talking about, mum? And then she ends up having to just leave really suddenly and try and piece together what's been happening in her mum's past and why her mum has all these things set up to make an escape if necessary. So I found it was really, really good. Yeah, I gave it a 4.25 stars, so I really, really liked that one. And then after that, I finished David Diop's At Night All Blood is Black. Now, this book was just not for me, really. I think it was a very well written book and it was great at doing what it was trying to do, but it just wasn't my thing. So we are following a man who is from Senegal and he's in France and he is fighting for France in World War One. He's there with his friend from home, and when we get to the opening scene of the book, his friend is dying on the battlefield, and he's saying, like, please can you just put me out of my misery and kill me, because I can't take this kind of slow, painful death. And our protagonist says, no, I'm really sorry, I can't do it. And then his friend dies and he really regrets that he didn't help him. And so he then starts doing this revenge where anytime he kills a German soldier, he cuts off their hand and brings it back to the trench. And to start with, people think it's quite cool. And then when he's like done it more than sort of 3 times, they start getting really creeped out by him. And it sort of ruminates on the fact that he's seen in a very racist way by his compatriots and by the sort of officers and things in the army. And they want him to go and be a stereotypical, I hate this word, but like savage in inverted commas, on the battlefield, and they want the enemy to be really scared of him. But then they don't want him to be like that in the trenches. Yet when he starts bringing the hands back, that's how they see him. They're really scared of him. And so he's basically saying, well, you want me to play to your race. You want me to play to your racist stereotype when it suits you and not when it doesn't. And we hear a bit about his past in Senegal and growing up with his friend, and I found it's very short. It's only about 150 pages, I think. And because it's so short and because it covers quite a bit, it's in this very sort of sparse writing style. And I like to go into more detail with things and know people better. And I would say that I know that some people really like this book, and it was listed for the International Booker Prize, but it just wasn't a book that was my cup of tea. And so I'm going to be passing that one on. After that, The Art of Fielding by Chad Harbach, which I've had for years, and this was on my TBR spin. This was the book that I read for May's prompt, which was to let AI choose your next book off your stack. And this one was a real success for me. This is a campus novel, and I do love a campus novel. It's set in the early 2000s, and it's following 5 different people. It is set around baseball, but I'm not a baseball fan. I don't know anything about baseball at all. And so I don't think it's at all necessary that you know about baseball in order to appreciate this book. The main characters that we have is a guy called Henry, and he is a rising star in the baseball world. When he comes to the college, he is very skinny and underweight, and nobody's taking him seriously until they see how well he can play. And he's actually about to equal a record of one of the greatest baseball players of all time in terms of how many catches he's made without dropping the ball. And a guy called Mike, who is an older student at the college, takes him under his wing, tries to help him put on weight and help him build muscle, and he really builds his performance, but it's at the expense of his own performance. There is also Henry's roommate Owen, who is on the baseball team and who is gay. There's a college professor who is in love with Owen, one of the students, and there's also the college professor's daughter, Pella, who is newly divorced and coming back to stay with her dad on the college campus. So all of those 5 stories interweave with each other. We follow them all at different times, and I just really enjoyed this story. The writing was really good. I think this is the only book that the author has written, but he has an online magazine, co-founder and co-editor of N+1 magazine, and that's still running, but he hasn't written any more books, which I'm disappointed with because I loved this book. And yeah, so it looks at sort of just coming of age stories, growing up, falling in love, falling out of love, being a student, being sort of doubting yourself and your abilities. All of those kind of things are covered in this book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I then listened to 2 audiobooks. So I've mentioned this before, but one of my goals of this year was to work through my back catalogue of audiobooks that I've bought from Audible at different times. And the 2 oldest ones that I had are the next 2 that I listened to. So I had The Foundling by Stacey Halls, and I had The Meaning of Mariah Carey by Mariah Carey. So the Foundling I'll talk about first. This one really drew me in right from the get-go. Our main character is a young girl called Bess. She has a baby out of marriage when she is about 16 years old, and she's in a very poor family. The dad is already married to somebody else, and she knows that she can't keep her daughter. So there is a foundling hospital where women can bring their babies, and there's an event once a month where there's lots of different balls in a bag, and the mother has to pick out a ball blindly, and if it's a white ball, the baby can stay at the foundling hospital. If it's a black ball, the baby can't. And I think if it's a red ball, the baby's like next in line if another baby who's not deemed to be healthy enough or anything can't stay. So Bess gets a place for her daughter at the foundling hospital, and she leaves her, and she knows that if she ever manages to save up enough money, she will be able to go and reclaim her daughter. So she's saving so hard for 6 or so years to be able to go and collect her daughter. And then when she goes to the foundling hospital and says, I'm here, I've come to get my daughter, and she's so excited, the man who has the register says, well, you collected her the day after you dropped her off. She's not here. She hasn't been here for like 6 years. And so we then have to find out what happened. And we hear from not only the perspective of Bess, but also the perspective of the person who collected her daughter. And it really drew me in. It's set in Victorian London. It's a setting where you're drawn in. It's one where you get to know the characters and you get to care for the characters, and you really care what happens in the story as well. So I thought it had the right level of suspense and emotion, and I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. It was my first Stacey Hall's book, but I do own The Familiars by her, so I would like to read that quite soon because I think her writing is really good. And then The Meaning of Mariah Carey, it was a little bit of a disappointment, if I'm honest. And I have previously spoken about Jessica Simpson's memoir and Alicia Keys' memoir that I listened to probably 2 years ago, and I absolutely loved both of those. They were both 5-star best books of the year books for me. I really loved them. And had I not listened to them, maybe I would have loved Mariah's more, but hers didn't quite match up. And I felt like she did a great job at reading the book, and she also sings quite a bit throughout the book where I didn't realise that she writes all her own music, and she will sing little bits of a song when she's told you about the event, and then you kind of know what she's singing about in that song, which was really nice. And I found that she was a really likeable person. I didn't realise quite how much hardship she'd gone through, how poor her family was, how unstable her family was when she was growing up, how much her family have sold her out as she's become more successful. I knew she was in an abusive marriage with Tommy Mottola, but she talks about that a lot. And I didn't realise how much struggle she'd faced as a child growing up as mixed race. And there's quite a lot about the different musical collaborations that she's done and everything like that. What I would say is that the pacing of the book is off for me. The first third of the book is about her childhood, and she goes into a lot of detail about her childhood. And that may be because for her, she feels that's what formed her character, and she felt it was really important to go into all that detail. But I felt that there was too much detail about her childhood, and then not as much detail as I would have liked about her career, which I think is probably what most people would want to read about when they're going in to hear about her life as the person we know as that, one of the biggest selling artists of all time. And then when it got more towards the end, when she meets her second husband and when she has her children, that bit was rushed through really quickly. It was almost like she'd thought, well, this is getting a little bit long now, so I'll just quickly tell you about this guy. We wanted to have kids, I got pregnant, I had the twins, and then that's it really. It's kind of that quick at the end. And I was really surprised by that, because it starts off so slowly and then it just speeds up and speeds up and speeds up. So I didn't feel that the pacing was right. And I think if that had been changed, the first portion was shorter, the middle portion was around the same, but the third portion was longest, then I think it would have been more for me. But I still gave it 3.5 stars. I learned a lot about Mariah Carey, and I found she was portrayed in a very positive light and has been through a lot, and is actually much more of a humble person than I thought she would have been. So that was that one. I think I'm just going to finish off by telling you about what I'm reading at the moment, and I think I'm going to have to do a separate haul video because we're already at about 16.5 minutes. So what I'm reading at the moment, I have Boudica by Manda Scott, which I'm doing a buddy read with Aaron from Aaron Read a Book, or Aaron Read a Book, and I am this far in, so I think about 20% in. It's a very big book. It's probably about 800 pages, 700 pages. And it's the imagined story, based on as much fact as you can get in a time period where there's no written history, of Boudica, who was a legendary warrior of the Iceni tribe. And this is set in AD 33 at the beginning. There are 4 books, but I'm not sure if the 4th book is about Boudica or not. But it's a long series, and the author is actually a vet. She has written other books before, but she said this is the book that this is a series that she was sort of born to write. The writing is so immersive. I can absolutely picture that I'm in Iron Age Britain, and what the people are like and what they're doing with their time and their craft and their living conditions and all of those kinds of things. I think she's done a great job in evoking that atmosphere. There's a lot in here about sort of mysticism and dreaming and the meaning of dreams, and I love all that stuff. I love the ceremonies in here, and I love hearing about the healing that they did in those days and the communication with the gods and all of those things. I absolutely love all that. So it's right up my street, and I'm really, really enjoying it. And I'm very intrigued to see what happens. I'm guessing it's only going to go up. She's so interestingly, Boudica is actually known as Boudica in this book, and I think there is a name change, but I don't know why or how that happens. And she is about 12 at the moment, so I'm guessing it's not going to go too far ahead, because otherwise there wouldn't be 3 books. So yeah, so that is that one. I am also reading this book called Light Perpetual by Francis Spufford. So I was watching an old video from Sarah at Freshly Read Books channel, and she spoke about this book as being her favourite book of the year, or second favourite book of the year, I think, a couple of years ago. And I thought it sounded really good. I wanted to have a look if they had it in Waterstones, and I was browsing, and they did. And I'd got the bus into town that day, and I decided to just start reading it straight away, because we all know that joy of buying a book and straight away starting to read it. I probably shouldn't have started reading it straight away because I had other things on the go, but I did. And I'm really enjoying it. So the premise of this book is that it's based on a true event, but the details have been changed. So in World War II, we are in Woolworths, which is like a British department store, which sadly no longer exists. And there are 5 children in there with other people looking at saucepans with their parents. And all of a sudden a bomb comes through the ceiling and blows up all 5 children, lots of other people, and the Woolworths. And apparently this actual event happened in London, but the author has made it in a fictional London borough called Bexford, and has changed the details of the children because they don't want to do a reimagining of those children's lives. But what happens is the bomb goes off in the first section of the book, the very first few pages, in very slowed down detail. And then the book goes on to take these 5 children and imagine the lives that they would have had if they hadn't been killed in this bomb. And so we follow one day of each of their lives every 15 years. So at the moment, we're about, I think, 45 years ahead is where I'm up to now. No, 50. I'm 50 years ahead of when the bomb went off, each of these people. And I'm about to follow another day in their lives. And these are the lives of ordinary people. So they're just... what's interesting is it evokes the time period for each one, because we're like in the 40s, then the 50s, and we're going up. I'm about to start 1994, so it's interesting to see like what was happening at those kind of times. But it's very much listening to 5 ordinary kids growing up, not anybody who's gone on to live a life of fame or that kind of thing. It's just what would have happened. But also the characters have kids and stuff, and so you sort of think those kids wouldn't be there either, or any of the people who come forward to come in front of them wouldn't have happened if these children had died in this bomb, as was actually the case. So it's a really interesting book, and I will report back once I've finished it. The audiobook that I'm listening to is the second in the Wolf Den series by Elodie Harper. I listened to The Wolf Den in 2022, I think, and it was one of my best books of the year. And I have book 2 and now book 3 on audio, and it's the same narrator for all of them. She does a great job. And we are following Amara, who in the first book was working at a place called the Wolf Den as a sex slave with a group of other girls for a man called Felix, who was horrible. The books are set in Pompeii, and they are actually set at the same time as the Boudica book. But it's really interesting because the worlds are completely different. So in Amara's world, they live in houses with stairs, and they have communal baths, and they have lots of artwork and jewels. It's a lot more relatable to modern day life than it is in Britain in Boudica's time. And it's just really interesting to contrast the two together. But we're following Amara. I can't tell you anything about what she's doing because if you haven't read The Wolf Den, then it will be a massive spoiler. But going back to her and her friends is a real treat. It's very, again, evocative of time and place, of everything you can see, hear, smell, do in the time of Pompeii in AD 30s. And it's just interesting reading about that way of life. It's very suspenseful, this one. So it's very tense. I really am worried about some things that are happening. I really want to know what's going to happen. And so if you're interested in a book set in that time period with a pending volcano explosion, which I don't know how that's going to tie in with the books, I'm guessing that will happen in book 3. It's a really wonderful historical novel. So that's what I'm listening to. And then the final book that I'm reading is a non-fiction, which I'm about 25% through. And this is Loving War Tears by Byron Katie. She's someone who I came across on Super Soul Sunday on Oprah. She's a spiritual teacher, and she is talking about how you can deal with painful experiences in your life, whether they are minor or major, by asking these 4 questions and by working through the questions and turning around how you feel about certain things. Basically, based on the premise that what is already is, and you can't change it at that exact moment that it's happening. And so if you're trying to wish that it was different all the time, you're fighting a losing battle because it isn't different because it's already happening. So it's kind of based around that. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm reading it in sections. It has kind of an introduction, which I was quite familiar with in a way because I've watched Byron Katie do this as worked examples with people live before. And there's different sections, so like there's couples and family life, there's work and money, there's self-judgment, there's body and addictions, which she works through, giving different scenarios and how you can apply this to your life. So I'm finding it really good and really interesting so far. So that is everything I have read and am reading since I last spoke to you. I'd also like to just plug a couple of podcasts that I have been on and make sure that people are checking out these podcasts, which are great, not just because I'm on there, but they're great podcasts to listen to. So the first one is the Bookcast Club, which I have guested on twice now. So the second appearance that I have made is probably out now, but I will link the Bookcast Club down below so that you can check out the podcast, which is wonderful. And the second podcast that I've been on is one called Bedside Reading with Tara Jones. She is a fellow GP and she has different healthcare professionals, usually doctors, on her podcast each episode, and they talk about a book which doesn't have to be medical at all. She talks about how it is involved with the human experience, any issues around sort of health and things that kind of are discussed in the book, but it's not, I would definitely not say it's a podcast just for healthcare professionals at all. It's a book podcast which talks about the humanity in different books, and it's brilliant. So I'd like to just plug both of the podcasts, and I will link them both down below so that you can hopefully discover them if you're not aware of them already. And I will come back probably next time and do a haul video just so that I can show you the books that I've purchased since I last showed you a haul, which wasn't even that long ago. But anyway, I hope you're having a lovely week. Let me know your thoughts on any of these books, whether you want to read them, whether you have read any of them. Let me know anything that you've really read and enjoyed recently, or anything you've hauled, anything you're currently reading. I hope that you have a lovely week. Hopefully when I come back and speak to you the next time, I'll have a more normal voice. And I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.